Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Peya, Pedig Beis, Halacha Aleph. We're going to be learning Daf Yutches, starting Mamash on top of the Daf Chai. Before we begin with the recap, with the intro for today's Daf, I just want to share a few words that were shared here by Rabbi Blauner after we finished yesterday's shir. The last topic that we learned was about the Meitzar. And the question was if Peya is removed on produce that grew on the Meitzar, but the quantity was removed by an owner that owned that Meitzar. He owned the field to the right, he owned the field to the left, and he wanted to he removed the right amount for it all. And the Gemara at the end brought the Braisa, which explained, no, that the Meitzar is not like bottle two. The Meitzar is like a place for itself, and therefore you cannot remove Peya from it for the adjacent fields. So Rabbi Blauner says, that's the pshat, min ha-meitzar karase yutke. In other words, there's a place of meitzar, speaking about the power of davening, and hein keil kabed lo yimos, that there's a concept that if we take a daven, Hashem will answer our tefillas, min ha-meitzar, and it has to be min ha-meitzar. And then taka onani ba-merchav, and that's connected by hashgacha pratis. We're learning this kisisa tavshan pei dalid. There's a famous question that, on Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol walked lefnai v'lefnim, he didn't wear the big days off. Ein kateged nasa saneged. That's how careful we were. But yet, in the Kodesh Kodshim, not in Yom Kippur, the whole year we have the Shivrei Haluchas. Shivrei Haluchas, l'chura, is also connected to the Chet HaEgel. And it's in there the whole time. I ein kateged nasa saneged. The answer is no. The gold, we sinned with gold. The broken luchos is the meitzah. That actually was the opening, not the sin, but the consequence of. Post facto, the shivrei haluchos is that which brought about the luchos shniyos with all the Torah Shabbat Peh, with the infinity of the Torah. So, in other words, there's something special about meitzah, and interestingly, how it mirrors here in Nigla. Anyways, that's just a nice part to share it with all. The intro for today will be like this. Like we began this Perek ve'elu mafsik. Let's just review. We are learning pshat that mido oiraisa, you cannot give peya from one field for another. And then on top of that, that was the question. The oiraisa, the rabbanan, it sounded like yesterday we're leaning towards the rabbanan that of course, I get what two fields mean. What happens if you have one field, but there are certain barriers that are in that field? Whether it's a river, whether it's a ravine, the Gabbai is us. Here, if I said it wrong, he would correct me. So the Gemara today is going to go through all or almost all of the specific items mentioned in the Mishnah, and beginning with that there was an item that the Mishnah did not mention, like the Meitzar yesterday. Today we're going to speak about the Chatzav, grass, herb, plant, right? Or Chatsuba plant. We're going to see that it was used by Yehoshua to divide Eretz Yisrael, one shevet from the other. Many people used it to put it on the Meitzar between their property and the neighbor's property. What was unique about this herb is that it grows down deep, but it goes straight, doesn't go to the sides, and it's not even yoinik, doesn't even draw nourishment from one side or the other. It only draws nourishment from what's underneath it. So when you put it exactly on the barrier, the mila is it goes down deep, and even if later you don't see the top, or God forbid, if one of the shchenim are ganovim, they move the fence over, you can discover from the chatzav plant exactly where the barrier is. So it's something very little but very significant, and we're going to indeed see that that chatzav is another barrier, taka, not mentioned in the Mishnah. But when it comes to us, we're speaking about a grain field, we're speaking about a legume field, we're not speaking about an orchard. Chatzav will also be mafsik between one field and the other. The Gemara is going to then go through many of the items mentioned in the Mishnah, and what's going to be beautiful in today's daf, and that's a big rule. We're going to learn regarding one of the items mentioned in the Mishnah. There appears to be a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan what in a detail of that. And we always attempt, when possible, either to minimize a machlokes or even better, to take away a machlokes. So when you hear two Amoraim speaking about something, really two Tanoim, when it's possible, if we can figure out that he's speaking about one case, he's speaking about another case, but perhaps they're together, right? This union, we definitely attempt to do so if we'll have time. I know these are small daf, but we can learn it thoroughly with God's help. We'll give at least an introduction to tomorrow's daf, to daf Yutes, which will focus on the last machloikis that we have in the first Mishnah between Rab Meir and the Chachamim, as we'll repeat it if we'll get there, and then a couple of introductory words that will help us better chap, God willing, daf Yutes. Okay, Chavre daf Yutes, Amid Aleph on top of the Amid. So as Meitzar is taka mafsik, so here also another divider, even though the Mishnah does not mention it, that is mafsik, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina Amar, that chatzu voice, that's the plural for this chatzav, it's a shrub, it's an herb. If Kevin would be here, he would put up episode 18 pictures. So a chatzu voice, mafsikin lepeyam. Look inside the top maharafuldam. Asev, he calls it a grass or a herb. Shuhu yoinik negdoi, it only derives nourishment from underneath it, and therefore I chap, and that's why it grows straight down. In other words, you are attracted to your source. So if I'm getting nourishment from a tzaddik, you go towards the tzaddik. You know, the hayom yom, you put up a big fire, little fires go in that direction. It's getting its nourishment only from what's underneath it, which is taka why it went directly down. It clearly demarks. So if someone planted that, even though they own both sides, but if they planted a row of the chatzav, it can be skinny like nash. I don't know. It's a little acer. Who mafsik ben shtei sadais, and therefore the way we're learning midoyed isa, you may not give payout from one side to the other. Each side has to have its own payout. Says the Gemara. Now I know the word boye normally means he asked. So the Rash Shirilio, instead of simply teaching that he made a statement, so he says that Rash Shirilio, 3 lines from the top. He was wondering, what's the reason? I understand the question is that the chatzav plant is very little. And l'chora, little, bekamos should be an insignificant barrier, insignificant divider. So he was saying, like, efsher the tama, perhaps the reason is, back in the Gemara, that since Bahen Chilek Yehoshua Saaretz, Yeshua divided that it's Yisrael. That's one expression using the chatzah plant. Also, Asa Rabbi Chanina b'shem Rab Chizda, and instead of using the words chilek, he used the words tichem from tchum. He demarked the boundary, right? Bohem tichem Yeshua Saaretz. So maybe that's the reason. In other words, taket might be bekamus, quantitatively a skinny plant, a little plant, but it was a significant. The haraya Yeshua used it. Now, what's the difference between chilek and tichem? So look inside the Maraful, the second line from the top. Chilek, mashma, that the word chilek is used bein kol shevet v'shevet. The word tichem, tchum, I know it means the same thing, but the word tchum is used, what Yehoshua put the same plant, bein Eretz Yisrael v'chutz la'aretz. That's one reason of the shinu l'shoynos, or the Efsher, says the Marafulda, now, she'ein b'neim, ella shechayiv loimer b'loshan Rabbi, that no, the word chilek and tichem, no, whether it's bein shevet l'shevet, whether it's bein Eretz Yisrael l'chutz la'aretz, either this or that, they both mean the same thing. Each one quoted the lashon of his rabbi. We have a lot in Hasidus, this whole idea that even when the idea is the same, the choice of words that we pick automatically comes from the deepest part of our nefesh, and at fakert, and that's why a Talmud will be medayik b'l'shayin rabbi, because you want to be connected, the kesher of neshama ben neshama. You want to be connected with the deepest, to the best that we could. Dafka used the words that the Rebbe used. I just want to now that it's a short daf. I heard a gewaldige word that I would like to share from Rabbi Schachter, the Rosh Yeshiva of YU, shared it in the name of Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik, and regarding this tchum that Yeshua placed, and this is something that's mamish gavaldik. And for those of us who remember, and you can look it up, the first Tosfos in Yuma Bavli Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph on top of the Amid asks the following question. The Gemara over there in Yuma makes a statement, even though it's subject to a machloikis, but there are some that holds that Yerushalayim loy nischalka l'shvatim, and that's a halacha, which applying that halacha would mean that even though every male yid has an obligation to show up at least 3 times a year in Yerushalayim, when we would sleep over in a house in Yerushalayim, they were not allowed to charge us rent because they didn't really own it, because Yerushalayim loin is chalka l'shvatim. The zelu umazeh of the tumah of the clip of the world, when they're claiming that it's an international city, every dark idea has some root. That's the root in Torah. That amongst the Yidden, there is one opinion that says Yerushalayim belongs to all the Shvatim. Nevertheless, that whole sugya that even though you don't pay rent, you should tip. And they made more money than charging rent. That's the rule in life. Like all Chabad houses, they don't charge membership, but it ends up costing a lot more money. You understand? They don't. Someone here is laughing because he knows what that means. So, if you remember, when you bring a carbon, the hide, not of the oil that goes to the kohen. If I bring a carbon shlomim, the oil belongs to me. The hide is very expensive. So you would give the hides of the karbanis that you brought over Yantav, you would give it to the person that would host you. Anyways, that's the sugya. Yerushalayim is chalka l'shvat. So ask Tosfos a bomb question. In Zvacham Daf Nun Gimel, when we learn about the place of the Mizbeach, if you remember that whole beautiful Mizbeach, so there is a base at the bottom of the Mizbeach, but the Yesoid does not fully wrap all the way around the altar. On the Keren, the Roimis Mizrachis, almost all of the side of east, almost all the side of west, there is mamash no Yesoid. And the question is why? And the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because Binyamin merited to have the Mizbeach on his chelik. But Binyamin ze'ev yitraf, and that is an allusion to the Mizbeach that is toidev karbanis, so to say, in a kedusha way. And since it's amazing that Yerushalayim was divided between Yehuda and Binyamin, and exactly where is the tchum, in a way that it's not a straight tchum, that when you put the Mizbeach was bidiyuk on the chelik of Binyamin. And if there would have been a symmetrical Yesoid on the bottom of the Mizbeach, then that part of the Yesoid would have been on the chelik of Yehuda, and we don't want for any of it to be on the chelik of Yehuda. And no one debates that. The Mizbeach did not have a Yesoid all the way around it. So the question Tosfos asks is that according to Leman the Amar, that Yerushalayim lo nischalka l'shvatim, what are you talking about? Yehuda, Binyamin, it belongs to everyone. So there should have been a Yesoid all the way around. Tosfos gives an answer, so Rabbi Soloveitchik gave a beautiful answer. You should know that when it comes to Chalukas Haaretz, there are 2 dinim. This is the Briska Derech Halimut, coming back from Rab Chaim. There is a din of Kedusha and there is a din of Mamanis. When we have opinions in Chazal that Yerushalayim loy nischalka l'shvatim, which means Yerushalayim financially belongs to all the Shvatim, ad kedei kach, that even though you own a house there, can't even charge rent from people that are coming there, can only charge a tip, get a donation. That is b'negei dinei mamanis. But when it comes to kedushas haaretz, the way Eretz Yisrael was imbued with kedushas haaretz was only because the whole land was divided among Shvatim, and that means what we call today Yehuda. That was given to Yehuda, and yes, and Yehuda and Binyamin both have the schus of having part of Yerushalayim bechelkam. And the boundary is exactly in the Makim HaMikdash, in the way that the Kodesh Kachim is in the Cheluk of Yehuda. But the Mizbech is in the Makim of Binyamin Dafka the way it is, and you can't even put a Yesoid. That is B'negei Kedushas Haaretz. B'negei Dinei Mamanis, for that we say, one Shita, that the financial ownership of the Shevet was removed. So they have the Kedusha part of it. In other words, the Cheluk of Yeshua and the importance of demarking one Shevet from the other, coming back over here. Not just like Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz. It's not a din of the Mominus only. It's Kedusha. Kedusha is Eretz Yisrael. You have to put a barrier. That to know which is the chelik of which Shevet is so chashuv, they needed to place a boundary. And what did Yeshua pick? He picked the Chatzav plan. So coming back to our sugya stam, that Therefore, there's the fact, l'chora, it was used for that. I don't care how narrow it might be. Yes, it divides a field, and yes, and therefore, even though I own both sides, I may not give payah from one side on the other. Okay. So I think about it. The Mishnah mentioned, right, there's a nachal and there's a shalulis. And let's go with nachal, that it's a stream of water. And what is a shalulis? It's an irrigation canal. So why do we need to have both? We get the idea. If there's a water that goes through the field, one side and the other side are two different fields. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why the Mishnah has to mention both. That shalulis, when do we say shalulis? Which is generally narrower, that also divides the field only while there is actually water in it. Kol shehi moishachs. Aben nachal, when it comes to the stream, let's touch a stream. Even when there is no water in it, in many streams during the rainy season or after the rainy season, if you're near snow, there's stream. At some point in the summer, it dries out. A nachal will always be mafsik. Why will the nachal always be mafsik? So the Bir Hagra we have in the Manim, Ksav Yad Aleph, right? It's a physical thing. 5 lines from the top. Shalulis Hainu Kol Shi Moshechus Peirush She'einu Rechava Kol Kach. That's what he types. Since it's not so wide, when does it divide? Lekach tzarich she'ei moishech dafke. Ma she'en ki nachal af al pi she'einu moishech, says the Bir Hagra. Okay. And the hashtag, okay, then he goes, and in other words, let's go back in the Gemara. The Mishnah mentioned 4 items now. Derech hayachid, derech harabim. Shvil hayachid, shvil harabim. When we learned the Mishnah, I know there are many opinions. Let's just repeat to be consistent. Derech yachid. Derech means a road. Shvil means a path. Today you would define it by paved, not paved. L'chora. Nothing was paved then. So the way we teach when we learned the Mishnah, we'll keep to that. Derech hayachid means a road. It's a road. Why is it a road? Even though it doesn't belong to the public. 4 amas wide. That's the way we touched. Derech harabim, we got that from a Sechta Shabbos, from Hilchos Shabbos, from the Eruvin, means 16 amas. Shvil, a shvil hayachid means it's less than 4 amas wide. Yes, we know what yachid means. It's not used by the public. Less than 4. It's called a shvil hayachid. Shvil harabim, it's taka used by the rabbim, but if it's not 16 amas wide, it's called a shvil. And the question will always be, why do we have to have all of them? Let the Mishnah just write the smaller one, bomba, and then you have a thing. So let's go in each category. Why do you have to mention both? If even a derech hayachid means you have a road. That's 4 amas wide. If it's mafsik between one side and the other, so then the question, what's the need for the Mishnah to mention that l'chora, which is automatically implied in it? Of course, if the bigger, the better. Answers the Gemara. I'll tell you why. Let's go with the Girsa, not Anna, but Asam. That Asam, Mei Marlach, comes to tell you that Afilu derech harabim. Don't forget, we only learned this Mishnah, but we already chazered that the not Mishnah base, not Halacha base, Halacha Gimel will come to the Stei Ilan. And the Mishnah is going to say that none of these barriers are mafsik, or Stei Ilan, only an actual fence. So the Mishnah wants to mention, guys, a derech harabim is 16 amas wide. You know what that means? I don't know what that means. That's 25 feet. That's wide, even in the modern world. You would think a derech harabim should be mafsik even an orchard. No, the Mishnah mentions big to tell you, afilo derech harabim ain't a mafsik le'ilan. Ela God, they're beautiful. And now let's go to the next. Says the Gemara, same kasha. Even the Taninan Shvil Hayachid, which let's say it's a path, meaning it's not even for amas wide. It's not even used. It's not even open to the public. And if that is nafsik, so the same question, Shvil Harabim Matzorcha, you cannot give the same answer here to contrast it with Stei Ilan, because the Mishnah already mentioned that a derech harabim is not mafsik. That's the biggest chiddush. So you don't have to, if you have the biggest, you don't have to go to a notch underneath it. The Gemara has another answer. If you remember, the Mishnah made a statement that only went on the shvil. The Mishnah says that when is it mafsik? If it's used the whole year. By a path, we said, when is it a hefsek? Only if it's used the whole year, 365 days. There were many paths, by the way, that were only used in one season or in another season. So here the chiddush will be that even the bigger of the shvilin, if it's not kavua both in the rainy and in the summer, it won't be a hefsek. Gewaldig. Then going on, the Mishnah is said habur. Habur means a part of the field that was left fallow. So Chaver, understand, you own the land. You own the land, a big parcel. Somewhere in middle, another thing I want to add, when we speak about a hefsek, right, if this is the land, we're going to go with this, there's a whole discussion about it. What is mafsik? If it goes all the way through. Because really what we're going to have a discussion is how wide does it have to be? So we said, in other words, if you left in middle of the field, it doesn't have to be in middle here. It can be here, it can be here. I don't care where it is. And it's your field and you planted the same product or not. The part is, since in middle, there's a place left fallow, that's the board, or even if you plowed it, but you didn't plant, that's the nir. Or if you have two types, just as we explained, I know there's a kalayim issue. We already spoke of that when we learned the Mishnah, that it's amazing how by kalayim, even mido oiraisa, marasayin is significant, lekula. So if you're planting one type on one side and one type in the other side, and in the middle, because it's in a different angle, you can plant here a different from the like wheat, and you can plant over here. There is a way to plant barley, even if it's mamish near. So since you have wheat, here barley. Oh, so from the wheat you have to give payah separately. That was the three cases: bur, nir, zerach. Just to make up that all of these three is where it goes completely through. Now I want to know, how wide does it have to be? That's really what the Gemara is saying. And it appears that there's a machlokes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. That's going to be the sugya, and the Gemara is going to make an effort and say, no, they don't argue. Because there is a logic to say that let's go with the bur. Yeah, I mean, how wide? By the water, we didn't go there. Because water is mamish water. By irrigation canal, when there's water flowing. But it's not water flowing. It's not a geded. It's not the chatzav that at least under the ground it goes deep. You left a strip fallow. So what? There is a minimum width. So how do we measure that? So habur vanir vazera achan. Let's go with first what Rav said. Rav Amar, like this. By bur and the nir, how, this is so gavaldik. How wide does it have to be? The Gemara is not going to give you a width. Rav is not giving you a width. You know why he's not giving you a width? We're going, guys, that it has to be through the whole field. I can have a field that's very big. I can have a field that's very little. I want for the area that was left, either bur, which was completely fallowed, or only plowed but not planted, the total of it should be the amount in which you can plant a base roiva. A kav is 24 eggs. A quarter of a kav is 4 eggs. What are we talking about? The amount of land that you need to plant a quarter of a kav of seeds. How much is that? That's the way they spoke Lashonas. So it's a bit more. It's a bit more than 100 square amos. We're not going with 100, which is a rounded number. We're going with the roiva hakav, which is the rounded number. So what does that mean, guys? It means like this. If the field is very long, so the strip, I don't care how narrow the strip is, right? If you want to give the total square footage, what's the length? If the field is very long, it could even be something very narrow. If the field is very short, because you need for this bur or near to go from one end to the other. Not that it's just somewhere in the middle. That's not mafsik. So Rav is emphasizing it's not about how wide it is. What's the sum total of the square footage of either the makom habur or the makom anid? If it amounts to it's 104 plus, more than 100 square amos. So the amount of land. Of course, no one likes planting a narrow lawn, but if you would square it up together, in it you can plant a quarter a quarter of 24 6 eggs of seeds. Okay, in that area, then that's mafsik. If the total of that bur or nir is not base roiva, then it's not mafsik. Now, when it comes to a zera achar, guys, remember what we're learning zera achar. We're learning that you have wheat and wheat, and for some reason in middle, ba'oifen hamuter, you planted another species. Dear, says Rab, I don't care how much. It can be as narrow as you want, as long as it divides the field. Okay? Comes along Rabbi Yechanan, and it appears that he's arguing. Rabbi Yechanan says he began to speak about widths. He says, by the bur, and by the nir, and by the zera achar. How much? So he says, it sounds like it's not about how long it is, it's about the width of that hefsek. That was again the whole chiddush of today's opening about the chatzaf plant. The chiddush, why it's effective, is because Yeshua Tichem Chilek, it's very narrow, it's a chiddush. Here you need to have a width. How wide? B'shleisha tolamim shel posiach. So there are furrows that are made when you plow. Actually, the Rashadilio points out, posiach means when you open up, when you're doing groundbreaking. See, they would plow the field a few times. The first groundbreaking plowing was the widest. After they already plowed it once, and now it's rained, and now they're replowing it, it would be narrower. So you can't just say that everything was standardized. The standard width of three of the groundbreaking, and how much is that? 2 amos. So it's a big machlekes. It's a machlekes in both cases. By the bur and the nir, Rav said, it's not about width, it's about the total of 104 amos and a bit. When it comes to the zera achar, Rav says, it could be skinny. Rabbi Yechanan is saying all three have to have 2 amos. All right, so says the Gemara, ma upalig, are they arguing? That you can say this by every argument. Well, first of all, if they would have been sitting together and they would have each given this statement, then clearly they're arguing. But many things do not work that way. Rav is sitting in Syria, Rabbi Yechanan is sitting in Eretz Yisrael. We are compiling their opinions. It's difficult to figure out why would they argue like that. For some reason, the Gemara intuited that they're not arguing. And the Gemara is trying to put it together. So the first attempt is by saying that the Rav, which means that which Rav is talking about. And what is Rav talking about? We're only focusing now on the zera acher. When did Rav say that if you planted a zera acher, even if it has a width of a kolshu, it's going to be mafsik each of the sides? That is, if the item that was planted, the zera acher that was planted in the middle, is an item that it itself has to have payah left from it. And that's going to help us for the daf yutes. For example, most vegetables, which are perishables, don't have to have payah removed. So in other words, it's not just the appearance. Everyone can look. When you're flying in the airplane, you can see, wow, it looks like patches. You can see it's zera acher. It's not just about that. It's that if that which is in middle is a davar chashuv, that has to be harvested, and whose harvest is machayev payah, that din of chiyuv payah is the chashivus needed to separate. That's why he said even a kolshu when it's luchoiv and payah. However, the whole big daf yutches amid base, Rabbi Yechanan, when he says no, you have to have 2 amas, even though it's a zera achad, that's bepitur bepayah. If what you planted in the middle of your wheat field, for whatever reason, you planted tomatoes, they don't have the perishables. So then, if it's not 2 amas wide, even Rab would be moide that it's not going to be a hefsek for pay. Remember, a barrier has to be something significant, either physically significant or halachically significant. What makes something halachically significant? If something in itself is obligated with payah. If that in itself is garnished bitnish, then without the physical width, it's not considered a hefsek.
So does that mean we're saying, imagine you have a legume field, which is high in payah. Next to it, you have a big tomato field, which is not high in payah. And then another legume field next to that. So even if you have a very wide
they're
all touching are you saying that would not be a barrier because it's not? We don't have the separate 2 amma shvil.
No. If the legume itself is 2 amas, that does separate both sides.
No, I'm saying you have a legume.
Legume. What's in the middle by your example?
Tomatoes.
If the tomatoes is 2 amas, then you do have to separate from the legume separately. No, the problem is Rav said that.
No, but you don't have a separate empty.
We don't want empty. Zera achad is not empty. That's why we said I lochoida for kalaim. Anyways, there's the empty. No. We're speaking about a type of way of planting where you can plant back to back. It won't be kalaim. So again, when people learn zera achad, it's not one field and one field. No, it's wheat and tomatoes.
Okay.
The zera achad is being mafsik. Rav says even the kol shuhu is considered the hefsik. This side and that side need their own pay. Rabbi Yechanan says it has to be 2 amas. Says the Gemara, they're not arguing. When Rav is saying kol shuhu, if what you planted in the middle is garlic, since it itself has to be tied. In other words, the halacha of peya is machshaveh. A mitzvah is machshav something. So it's like a barrier. What made it chashuv? The fact that there's an obligation to leave peya from it. Rabbi Yechanan, who said you have to have 2 amas, he's speaking about an item that does not need to be tied. Even Rab will be moide if it doesn't need itself, not tied. Peya, to be payed. Then, if you don't have 2 amas, Danny, then if it'll be 2 amas, then it's called a hefsek because of the it has to be something either the gashmis or beruchnis. So the Gemara says you're trying to reconcile. You succeeded by the zera achad, but don't forget that Rav and Rabbi Yechanan also spoke. What are you going to do with the bur venir? Says the Gemara whether you have the girsa batani or not. Bur venir, right? We know chayav and bepeya. They're not chayav and peya. See, bur venir, Danny, is what you were imagining by the zera achad. Bur venir means it's empty. And there we also see a machloikas, whether you have to have the sum total of base roiva. How wide will it be? It has to do with how big the field is, like I mentioned. And according to Rabbi Yechanan, independent, it can be long. You can have a piece of parcel meant for you 10 miles. I don't care. The width has to be 2 amas.
Makes sense.
So the Gemara says, here they write it, don't argue. I'll tell you how now. I'll tell you how they don't argue. Min ma the amarav is only the stay baininess. Stay baininess means that the separation of the field, the separation of a field of the average size, which is that the strip in the middle, shaykh to be roiva hakav, because the whole field is a large field, and you don't have to have large. Even if the field is what was then called baininess, then you need to have a roiva hakav. Let me ask you a question. What happens if the whole field, not the fallow, Danny, the whole field, he gives an example, is 50 on 2. How much is 50 on 2? What's it? 100. We're saying roiva is 104. If the whole field, the ganze field is less than the roiva, and you are mafsik it with a fallow, with a bur or a nir, it's not in the realm of shaykh for that to have the base roiva. The whole field doesn't have a base roiva. That is where Rabbi Yechanan says, I need it to be 2 amas wide. And by the way, if you have a field that's very little, 2 amas will be nothing. I'm saying a field that's a couple of feet. And you have 2 amas wide. That's and if it's not 2 amas, no. 3 to line. 3. What did Rabbi Yechanan say? Rabbi Yechanan said, I'm sorry, I keep on saying 2 amas. Rabbi Yechanan said, 3 talomim, right? Yeah. No, 2 amas. Yeah. That's the same thing. 2 amas. In other words, Rav also will agree you have to have 2 amas. When does Rav say that we want for the bur or the nir to have a total of 104? That if it's in a normal field, which means it's shaykh for it to have that size, because the field is bigger than that size. Let me clear. If the whole field, the whole field is only 50 by 2, it doesn't mean 50 by 2. It can be any square footage that the sum total is only 100 square amas. The sum total is a little bit already less than the roiva. The fur is going to be a bit not shy. You don't have that amount of land, so you can't use that as a shear. So you have to give another shear. For that, Rabbi Yechanan said to Am is white.
So when you think of Rav versus Rabbi Yechanan here, which one is being more machmer and which is more?
They both agree with each other. That's the whole point. They're not arguing.
So you say Rabbi Yechanan also agrees to this?
Yes. They're trying to apply the Mishnah. See, that's the thing. The Gemara, the Mishnah is very vague. That Mishnah is they give ideas. You have to bring it down. You're coming down. So the Gemara begins to bring it down. What does that mean? Right? When you have to make a new bracha, when the food digested in your stomach. How do you define that? Like when people read it today, we're very detail oriented. Okay, how many minutes? Give me the minutes. That's what the Amoraim are doing. Any fallow? What a fallow, which is the size of an antenna.
Makes sense. You have 2 hours. That's what
says the Gemara. Rabbi Yechanan only makes sense.
It's very hard to understand.
It makes a lot of sense because you need chashivus.
No, but the problem with Rav is that the bigger your field is, the smaller your barrier gets.
Doesn't matter. Since what was left.
Consistency there.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, imagine you have this massive field. You still only need 104.
Which is it can be the antenna of a grasshopper. Doesn't matter. Why? Because it's chashuv. What makes it chashuv? Any area where you can plant a certain amount. We're not farmers. Any area in which you can get that amount of seeds planted, that's called a chashuv. That's a chashuv thing.
So if it's this narrow, but it goes super long,
that's right.
That's called chashuv.
I'll tell you why. Because what's the purpose of farming? To have the product. If you can plant a roi v'hakav, you got the product. You know, it's unlike a house. By a house, you don't want to live in a house that's narrow and very long. You can't live there, right? A house is daled by daled, by a mezuzah. What happens if you have a room now? If you have a room that has the square footage of daled by daled, but it's not daled by daled, there's a big machlekes in halacha whether it's chayv and a mezuzah. Why? Because bias means to live. How can you live in 6 feet by 6 feet? I don't know. But one thing I do know that if you have a 3 feet by whatever, you make it up there, you cannot live in there. That's why you put them in mezuzah. But when it comes to a field, no one is living in the field. The field is to plant produce. If you can plant base rei v'hakav, it's good. Land is land. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's about chashivus.
By a sukkah, by the way, they have very small sukkahs. Isn't there the minimum shear?
By Zion by Zion.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, by Yasuka for sure, it's not the square footage. You have to have Zion by Zion. If you have 4 tfachim by, you make it up on the other side, you're not going to no sukkah.
Like Rabbi Planner does with his car, he puts out the door of his minivan, puts some schach.
Yeah, because you have Zion by Zion. Okay, go on. We're good.
Zion is ratio to Reuben. I mean, sukkah is ratio to Reuben.
In other words, you have to, and that's the whole point, that if you have something very narrow by Yisuk and very long, you cannot fit Rosh. When it comes to living, living it has one chashivus, and a field is to plant. Rav is gavaldik. Rabbi Yechanan was needed because what happens if you don't have if it's a small field? What are you going to do? Okay. Let's just it's small dafim and which is great to get to learn slower. Let me first review what we had in the Mishnah and give an intro to what we're going to start learning tomorrow. So in the Mishnah, we spoke about someone that planted one field. Let's say it's a wheat field, and we're going to learn more details tomorrow. If what is growing did not even reach a third, we're not talking about that, but there's a certain amount of development that happened in the product that it's already something. It's not fully matured. If one would have been harvesting it normally, Lamaichel Adam, they would have waited more time. If someone is harvesting it, Lamaichel Behema, behemoths can eat shachas. Shachas is underdeveloped grain. And that was something that people did. They had animals. And they, whatever the harvesting, they harvested early. So that was the case of the Mishnah. So someone had a field, and again, a strip in the middle of the field. They went ahead and they harvested a whole strip for shachas. So now when you look at the field, you have this side and you have that side. Rav Meir says, mafsik. No, it's after you harvested the shachas, now you have 2 separate fields. We just learned Dani Burvenir. Let's go with the shiurim. It has to be that shear. And there's no machloikis. So now it's two fields. Now, the case of Bur V'nir before in the Mishnah where there was no machlokes is lechatchila, you planted it with a strip that was left fallow, or with a strip that you only plowed. Here we're speaking about someone that planted the whole field. The speckled we spoke out yesterday, we're going to have that later. This is not speckled. This is one field, and when the wheat came to a certain point, you own animals, you decided, I'm going to take some of it for my animals, and you went down in the middle. So now you have two fields. Rab Meir says mafsik. And the Chachamim Oimrim, then they ain't no mafsik. But they're moida that if after you harvested it, when you're still leaving the two sides growing, if you plowed it, that was the last thing in the Mishnah. If you did charisha, boom, now you have a proper hefsek. Now it's a bur. It has to meet the shiurim that we just learned. Now you have two different fields, and now you have to be maniach payah, not mafresh. It's a better. You leave the payah from each field for himself. That is hakoitzel shachas v'chulei. So I want to say like this. What's the introduction? Same thing. It's difficult to understand Rab Meir because it's one field, and you harvested. You harvested for shachas. So what? But you began to harvest. Like what would happen if I harvest a little bit today, I have a kasha, and tomorrow I harvest a little bit more? What happens if someone, for whatever reason, harvested in the middle here when it was fully developed? No one will hold that it's considered a hefsek. I'm not saying that people do it. Maybe people go on a seder, but it could be a yeshiva bacher. You took a tractor and you went in the middle. But now that you went in the middle, you have to be mafresh on both sides. So really, the hemshech to what we learned in Daf Yud Ches is that a barrier has to have chashivus, either physical chashivus. Torah makes it even more chashiv. What would that mean? Do you have to separate payah from the shachas? Al derech we learned by the Zajac, mamish by the Zajac. Rabbi Yochanan are not arguing because do you have to be mafresh payah? If you have to be mafresh payah, let's say from whatever you had in the middle, from the garlic, onions that Rambam says, then even Rabbi Yochanan is moida kol shehu. If it's tomatoes, lamashol, then even Rabbi is moida. If it's not tuamas, it's not called a hefsek. Same idea over here. It must be Rab Zera, which we'll learn tomorrow, is based on the following. Rab Meir would never hold that the shachas harvest, which is now fallow, is so important that it's mafsik the fields only because Rab Meir holds b'negei what we'll learn about in the Masechta Menachos tomorrow, that shachas itself has to have payah left from it. But since you went in the middle, in the shachas, and the shachas itself is mechuyev in payah, it's almost that chashivus now is mafsik both sides. If Rav Meir would not have held that when you harvest l'shachas, if he would have held, and there's a machlokes tanoim, that you don't have to leave payah, then he would agree with the Chachamim that without charisha, just because you decided to make your harvest in the middle when it was still not fully ripe, you leave it a little bit more, it's going to get fully ripe. It's the same in, you planted it all together, you decided to harvest it, so the din of Rav Meir is based on that, which is great. And now, God willing, we'll continue tomorrow where we left off. Danny, what are you looking at me like? It's simple. You know, if what you harvested in the middle is shachas.
You have one field.
Yeah.
I decide, for whatever reason, I'm going to go harvest the thing in the middle.
Because you have animals.
Now I have to leave payah of that thing that I harvested.
That's a machlokes tanoim. And if you don't have to leave payah, why would you not have to leave payah? Because it's shachas, because it's not developed. Do you have to leave payah from something that you harvested when it's only for animals? What to do? What's the first thing you learn in the Mishnah? Oichel.
But it's not part of the first line.
So that's the machlokes tanoim. 1 second. If it's not called oichel, you don't have to leave payah. Should have said it. Well, oichel.
What's the time separation? Like, what if one is today and the other one is tomorrow?
I think it's 2 weeks. I don't think it goes that way. I think it's about ripe or not. If what you are taking is not yet fit for human consumption, and it's taka harvested only for animal consumption, even though you planted it for human consumption, and if you would have left it into it, like certain foods by default, as pasta.
So you have one field, you theoretically on that one field could have multiple pairs because of the different.
No, because the definition of pay that we learned is that it all ripens at the same time. Like
very good.